Today's webinar is really special because we've got our friends and partners from Proofpoint on with us here with AWS. And I'm going to ask Toby to do a little legal work for us, if you would, please.
Thank you, Zip. Hello, everyone. If we could just click over to the next slide, there it is. We do like to let everybody know right at the beginning, we are recording this presentation so that we can obviously share it with folks who weren't able to attend today. When you registered for it, you were asked if you would provide approval to share your information with our friends at Proofpoint, since we are talking about an opportunity that makes use of both companies' technologies today. If you didn't provide that consent, but you would like to, can you please send a note to the email address you see on the screen, just indicating your contact information and that you approve for AWS to share your information with Proofpoint. And we'll remind you again at the end of the presentation, but we wanted to make sure folks were aware up front. Back to you, Zoe.
Great. Thank you very much, Toby. So without further ado, why don't I do a quick introduction since we just had Toby on the mic. Toby is a principal with the SES team and is here representing SES and Mail Manager. And then we've got our good friends Ash and Matt are both here from Proofpoint, and they're going to take us through various scenarios, and we're going to talk about use cases and the technology and all the benefits that accrue from using it. So without further ado, what I thought we would do is hand it over to our friend Toby for a little bit of early setup on Mail Manager and some of the key elements of this solution.
Perfect. Thanks, Zip. So, let's go back one slide. There we go. So SES launched Mail Manager middle of this year, and it's designed to sort of play a part in what was traditionally the mail relay business. But it expands on that somewhat. Some of you may have spent time setting up a postfix server or trying to use exchange transport rules to do various things. Mail Manager is meant to be a sort of technology neutral mail management service. Honestly, it takes the ability to capture mail that you choose to submit to it. We provide that observability feature so that we can see all the mail flowing through. And then you have the option to apply different routing rules, different inspection rules, different redirection rules, all within the Mail Manager console. So the more workloads you onboard, the more flexibility you have, and the better overall or aggregated view you gain of all your organization's email activity. One of the important things that we've already seen from early adopters, they're AWS customers with a large number of AWS hosted applications which generate mail. And what they're trying to do is have a central control point where that mail leaves AWS to go to whichever recipients are in scope. And as a result, a lot of those customers are also Proofpoint customers. And we found very early on that there was a great opportunity to make this interoperability between hosted apps in AWS and the use of Proofpoint itself a much more secure and compliance-ready solution with the addition of Mail Manager. So we moved from the observability and the management aspects from the Mail Manager into the protection components, which are provided by Proofpoint. And I'll hand that over to Ash to speak to and take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. Zip, if you wouldn't mind, next slide. I wanted to give some context to Secure Email Relay, or SER, because most of you are familiar with Proofpoint on the left side of this slide, which is we have a history in filtering mail that is coming from the outside world into our organizations, and using Proofpoint on demand to do that. And then Proofpoint, of course, is that layer of email security where we're going to scan those messages and make sure that they're okay to deliver to employees. SER, then, the scope of this conversation is obviously on the right here, as you can see. So what we're doing is we're using that same technology from an email scanning standpoint, and we're bringing it to bear on your outbound application email. So instead of email coming in to my example here, yourcompany.com, this is all about email that is going out to the internet from yourcompany.com. And Zip, if you go to the next slide, and then of course, this has to do with Amazon SES and specifically Mail Manager, because a lot of the email that is being sent as yourcompany.com is coming from SES. So just a little bit more texture on what Toby was saying in terms of what Proofpoint's doing here. We're going to block any email that contains undesirable content or attachments. So we're going to evaluate messages from a spam and a malware standpoint, much like we do on your inbound mail. And then anything that we detect that contains sensitive information, we can block that outright, or we can payload encrypt it on the outbound as required. A number of you are familiar with those capabilities already with your user mail. Again, bringing them to bear on your application mail here. And then this is an opportunity to fold this email into your broader Proofpoint email ecosystem. So think about, you're familiar with the Proofpoint user interfaces, where you're accustomed to logging in and managing your user email. Well, you can log into those same interfaces and manage your application mail in this case. Or if you're familiar with the Proofpoint APIs and you're using those to pull inbound email data into, for example, a SIM, you can use those same APIs to do the same with your application mail.
Okay, so I think that this one's back to me. One of the things that we prioritized in developing Mail Manager was we recognized that there were a lot of solutions that really focused on mission critical mail. Maybe it's, your executive suite, your board members, critical project mailboxes, things like that, where essentially any amount of investment in protection and enhanced security is always going to be justifiable. But in the end, that's actually only a small subset of the total volume of mail that organizations are generating. There's an awful lot of application generated mail with status updates on tickets or confirmations for things that were submitted. You might have a whole subset of your corporate directory which is designed to manage mailboxes for subcontractors or seasonal workers, where they don't have the same degree of access to enterprise resources that your sort of full-time employees might have. What we wanted was to make it appealing for the overall email landscape to gain the visibility and observability benefits I mentioned previously through Mail Manager and the uniform set of controls for routing and delivery actions. And then, of course, as needed, to invoke tools like Proofpoint when the security concerns are appropriate and really demand that additional level of enforcement beyond the sort of core infrastructure security that the Mail Manager provides itself. So what we've seen is that this really enables a kind of GRC approach for email, and that's governance, risk management, and compliance. The goal here is you can't apply management tools to things you can't see. So the first part is to see it, to bring it into one place where you can observe it with a standard set of tools. And then from there to manage it, again, with a standard set of controls. So if you have a situation where you've set up a subdomain for your supply chain team, you may choose to create differentiated mail routing based on approved suppliers versus people who are submitting blind inquiries. And you can do that sort of thing with one set of routing controls and filters based on the domains of your known suppliers, as a simple example. At the same time, you might have policies that impact when your internal employees are allowed to send attachments to external recipients. And you can enforce based on those sorts of conditions as well. So Mail Manager is really about taking the traditional mailbox-centric view of mail management and extending it to all these other programmatic use cases that are widely distributed across large enterprises. And that was what brought us to the use case I mentioned at the beginning, which is AWS customers who've migrated their applications to AWS hosting, and they have dozens or hundreds of applications that are generating mail, but they're not strictly assigned to an end user's individual mailbox, and so they've traditionally fallen out of scope of a lot of the email management and security controls that enterprises deploy. Mail Manager lets you bring all those up to par as far as accessibility to these added tools, and then as you're going to see today, there's a very simple way to integrate them with Proofpoint SER for security enforcement, spam, virus, different policy controls that are security specific for the email content. So we'll move to the next slide. So this use case on the left I'll speak to. This is really just a restatement of what I've just talked about. A lot of these mail landscapes have not really risen to the top of corporate priorities for IT modernization because they sort of work. Mail by design is self-correcting. It's not always high performance when it does it, but generally the mail will get through. And so people don't feel the pain of an outage if it's a message that they weren't explicitly waiting to receive. Um, but if you're a cloud modernization manager, that's no longer good enough. You need to have confidence that you don't have shadow IT spinning up postfix servers. You don't have folks punching holes through firewalls to send mail to individual recipients outside. Um, and you need to be able to say to your board of directors that you've got a solid grasp on email compliance, usage patterns, observability, and error and fault handling. And Mail Manager really sits in the sweet spot of managing all of those goals, regardless of whether the mail originates from a person or an application, or it's destined to a person or an application from an external sender. So that's the first key use case. I'll ask Ash to speak to the second one on the slide.
Yeah. So from our perspective, from an SER perspective, we're primarily dealing with our users tend to be security or messaging folks. And these are folks that are responsible ultimately for the email that's being sent on behalf of mycompany.com, their organization's domain. And traditionally, SES email has been out of reach to these folks and their ability to bring security controls and compliance controls on that mail. And Mail Manager makes it possible now. So I think, from our perspective, very shortly after Mail Manager was released, we saw ourselves, and we also started immediately hearing from customers saying, hey, does this mean I can get hold of this SES email? We've always wanted to do that from a security standpoint. And we said, yeah, absolutely. And reached out to Toby and team, and they were hearing something similar from their users who were Proofpoint customers who wanted to be doing the same. So from our perspective, it's again, security messaging folks that want to get hold of this mail and ultimately be in more control of all the email that's sending on behalf of, in my example here, mycompany.com. So there's two options we wanted to present to folks. These are the two options that we've tested. We know they work great. Option one is, I'll just sort of work you left to right. I'm using app developers sort of generically here. This would include Toby's persona use case as well. But ultimately, you've got apps that are deployed in AWS far left. They're using SES to send email. Great. Now they can use Mail Manager, which means we can pipe that email from SES to SER. So what we do is and we'll show you how we do this, but we have SMTP auth performed between Mail Manager and SER on the right. And as I've already mentioned, so once it lands in Secure Email Relay, we're going to do what we do from a security standpoint and scan the messages for spam, malware, DLP, data loss prevention. That's the inspection of emails to see if they contain any sensitive information that you don't want released out to the internet, or if you do, encrypted. And then naturally, as the last hop here on the far right out to the internet, this is where DKIM signing would be performed. So we've got the thumbs up from an app developer standpoint on the left. And then for the Proofpoint persona of security and messaging folks, they're happy because they are able to touch the email. So that's option one, and then zip. And then option two is the exact same as option one. So the bigger boxes on the left are the exact same. What changes here is SER routes the email back to SES using SMTP auth. And then SES is doing the distribution of emails out to the internet from there. Why you would consider one over the other? Well, it really is just where do you want the egresses, the emails egressing to the internet from? Obviously, in option one, they would be sent to the internet from your two dedicated SER IPs and all of the things that come with that. And you would get visibility into what's happening on the deliverability side from SER. In this case, they would be sent to the internet from your SES IPs, whether those are shared or dedicated, depending on your scenario. And all of the things that come with that, including what's happening at the deliverability level, would be provided by SES in this case. But in both cases, again, far left, mail is moving from SES to SER, where that security layer is being brought to bear. When we were talking about these two scenarios, we naturally found ourselves, making sure we were tight on DMARC and SPF and DKIM. So this is just to make sure everybody is clear on how exactly, whether it's option 1 or option 2, the emails in this case double pass DMARC. So pass DKIM and SPF, and technically the alignment of both of those. So, in option 1, the emails are obviously being sent out from SER. As already mentioned, that's where DKIM signing is going to be performed. And it goes to reason that it's the SER IPs that would need to be in the SPF records of the sending domains. In option 2, the DKIM signing is happening by SES. And of course, the SES IPs would need to be in the appropriate SPF records of the sending domains. And then my first bullet point is to say the expectation here is that emails are sending with both an envelope and a header from org domain that are aligned with mycompany.com. So sending as you in both of those. So in that way, these emails will double pass DMARC on the receiving side. And indeed, when Matt, who's up next, goes through the setup, he'll show you a message header of evidence and proof of how this is how this works, and how, in our example, Gmail interprets everything from an authentication standpoint. So all this is to say, all good from a DMARC standpoint. Matt, over to you to walk folks through the setup, and maybe just to set expectations. Matt's not going to go into every field and in the most minute level of detail. We have an integration document that does this with a fine-tooth comb. Matt's going to give an overview of each of the steps at a fairly high level, and then, as I said, you can rely on the integration document for more details. But Matt, over to you, my friend.
Great, thanks, Ash. Yeah, this is just an overview of the steps to get Mail Manager talking with SER. There's a couple of configuration options you need to set up in Mail Manager, a couple of things in SER, and then you link them together. So go to the next slide. So first step is to set up a traffic policy in Mail Manager. The important thing to note here is Mail Manager supports a message size limit. SER also has a message size limit. The two of those need to match. If you don't have them matching, you could wind up in a situation where Mail Manager is accepting mail, and then an SER is rejecting it because the sizes are out of sync here. So I believe Mail Manager supports up to 50 megabyte messages max size. SER will support a little bit above that, so there's no issue with getting these two to sync up. Next slide. So here we're telling Mail Manager how to route mail to SER. So you set up an SMTP relay. You set up the SER server name here and the port. We have endpoints in the US and in Europe. Canada's coming early next year. For port numbers, we support 587, 465, 25. We're recommending 587 here as the easiest option. And then down at the bottom, there's an authentication piece. SER requires SMTP authentication. So we'll get to that point a little bit later in the slide deck, where we talk about actually getting those credentials into Amazon. Then you need to link them here you'll need to come back to this page to link them together to the SMTP relay configuration. So we'll get back to that in a minute. Next slide, please. Okay, there's a lot going on here creating a rule set. So here we're telling Mail Manager about the type of traffic that you're expecting to send through Mail Manager and what that looks like, so that they can recognize it, and then telling Mail Manager what to do with that traffic. So under rule conditions, you're setting up what this traffic looks like from either the sending address, the header from address, the sending IP, the recipient address. There's a bunch of options here. It's very flexible. So you define the conditions that Mail Manager will match on to identify your mail, and then the second box down below on actions, you're then telling Mail Manager what to do with that mail. In this case, we're wanting to relay that to SER. So you set up a SMTP relay action, which then points to the SMTP relay configuration we just created on the previous screen, and that tells Mail Manager to route the mail to SER. And there's a little box down there at the bottom that says preserve mail from. We're recommending customers click that, and what that does is it puts the mail from, or the envelope from address in control of the application that's sending the mail, and then Mail Manager will use that same address when it forwards it to SER. In a moment, when we show the SER configuration, in SER, you have to identify what sending address what mail from address you're using to send mail, and so these have to match. And it's easier if you click that box, then you've got control over that from the application sending it, and it will flow through Mail Manager. It'll flow through SER with the same envelope from, and that's also the domain you need to publish your SPF record on. And you also have to have that domain matching your header from address so that you can pass demarc on SPF. So that little box is key to getting all that stuff working together. Next slide, please. Okay, the last bit in Mail Manager is to create an ingress endpoint, and this brings everything together. It brings together your traffic policy, your rule set, your authentication details, everything all together, and then creates a public endpoint that you can then connect to with your application to submit mail to Mail Manager. Mail Manager supports SMTP auth. You can add authentication in here. We recommend doing that if you can. We recognize not all applications are capable of doing SMTP auth. And if your application is able to support that, we recommend doing it. If your application cannot authenticate, there is an option in Mail Manager to leave this open. Understand that it's a public endpoint, so you have to be very careful with your rule set to make sure that you're only forwarding mail that you want to forward. All right, next slide, please. Okay, now we move into SER. So with SER, you're creating what we call a relay user. It's just a user for relaying mail. You create this the same way you create any other relay user for any other application. There's no difference here. So you create a relay user, sign in a name, whatever tags and notes you want to add to it. Next slide, please. And here is where we're setting up the restrictions. So we're basically matching the signature of the mail that you're sending through Mail Manager. So you're defining what the envelope from address should be and what the header from address should be, so that you can match the mail coming through. If mail comes through and does not match what you've set up here in restrictions, SER will reject it. So it's very important this configuration is synchronized with what you've set up in Mail Manager and with what the mail you plan on sending. We do support wildcards here, so you can have, you can either define a specific address, or you can just have a wildcard user portion, or you can even wildcard the domain and match on subdomains. There's additional restrictions you can add here. You can restrict on what the sending IP will be, or a range of IPs, but understand that those IPs are going to be SES IPs. They're going to be coming from Amazon. So the use case here maybe isn't the best match, so we recommend probably just leaving that alone. You can add in all the SES IPs in here if you want to. Understand that if Amazon changes which egress IPs they're using for Mail Manager, this configuration could break and it could block mail. So we recommend just kind of leaving this alone. Further down on this page, you can't see is actually the message size restriction. So again, that needs to match your traffic policy in Mail Manager. Next slide, please.
Hey, Matt, just real quick on the IP restrictions, and this is also maybe for the SES folks, but could you at least put a CIDR in there that capture, I feel like a broad CIDR would be better than nothing, no?
You could definitely do that. Yeah, we do support CIDRs, multiple CIDRs, so you could capture, a wide swath of IPs here that are all owned by Amazon and reduce the chances of it breaking, but yeah. Okay, once you're done with through the SER setup, you will be given a set of credentials. So we will automatically generate a username and password. You can override that with your own username and your own password if you want to, but either way, at the end, you will have a set of credentials. Those credentials then need to be given to Mail Manager, so Mail Manager can actually log into SER. The way that's done is you create a secret in Secrets Manager, and you can kind of see in the middle of the page there, we've got a username and a password. You put your credentials in there. There's some resource permissions down below. You need to give Mail Manager access to this secret so that it can access these credentials for talking to SER. The install guide goes over this. It's also in the Mail Manager documentation as far as what permissions you need to add in here. Once you have this set up and saved, you go back to the SMTP relay screen that we mentioned earlier, and then include this secret into that SMTP relay setup so that Mail Manager can then access those credentials.
And Matt, I seem to recall the secret keys do very explicitly need to be named username and password.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
Mail Manager expects this secret to have the secret keys being username exactly as it's shown there and password exactly as shown there for it to work. Yes, that's correct. All right, and this is an example header from one of our test emails. So we sent a message through the system and sent it to an account we have at Gmail. You can kind of see the headers there. At the top is the stuff added by Gmail as it went through that system. You can see the authentication results header. So it's passing DKIM and passing SPF. And that's because we're controlling the envelope from, and we published. In this case, we're doing option 1. So the egress is through the SER pod. And so we added those IP addresses into the SPF record for the domain. So it passes SPF. It also aligns because we've got the envelope from aligning with the header from. The SER pod is also DKIM signing, and so we're passing DKIM as well. So we're double passing for DMARC, and we recommend customers do that because it just makes your mail more resilient. A little bit down further, you can see the DKIM signature there added by SER, and the handoff between Amazon and the SMTP-US SER endpoint. So you can see that link. It's going through Amazon SES, it's coming to SER, and it's going out. And then way down at the bottom there, you can see some of the headers that SER adds, indicating we're doing virus scanning, anti-spam scanning. I don't think we add anything if we're doing DLP, and we can also offer email encryption and those sorts of features.
We're maybe overemphasizing double passing DMARC. That's just on our collective minds with the Google Yahoo requirements of last year, particularly double passing. Like they've made it clear that they're not futzing around anymore from a DMARC standpoint. So that's kind of why we're really emphasizing these topics. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
So we can go to the next slide.
Gosh, it feels like last year, but it was this year, right? I guess they announced it last year.
Announced it last year, yeah.
Yeah, announced last year.
Enforcement was this year, and we're almost done with this year. Gosh, thank God, right? Okay. Toby, over to you, please.
Sure. So thanks, Matt. That was a great overview. The important part here is that while there were certainly there's a few steps to get the configuration between the two products working correctly, that is very much aligned to maintaining the level of security uniformly between both tools. So you heard Matt speak about a few different things that we need to make sure are matched between SER and Mail Manager. And really that's just good best practices for that observability of policy and configurations. We wanted to share a little bit because Mail Manager is a new offering. We obviously get questions about what else we're going to be doing with it. So we wanted to share a few of the focal areas that are prioritized for the coming year. You've heard us talk today about SMTP connectivity. And that's certainly not the only way to move mail around within AWS. So we will be expanding support to get mail into Mail Manager without having to route it through SMTP from your AWS applications over the public internet. So there's options coming there. We're also going to see more native integration with Mail Manager and other SES applications like the SendMail API for those of attendees who are familiar with it. There'll be opportunities to take advantage of some of the Mail Manager transport rules and integrations with various different features and products as part of your programmatic sending activity from SES as well. We have the ability through mailboxes and calendars features to deliver to mailboxes directly from Mail Manager today. We will be expanding on those features to allow, for example, on-demand provisioning or other sort of purpose-specific mailbox usage as a function of your mail routing features. And while we love that the integration allows all the knobs and dials to be connected, and adjusted. Clearly, there are opportunities to simplify that and make it just a little bit easier to play with our partner tools. And so we're going to be investing in those opportunities to just make it a simpler integration between the different product systems. We have a long list of interesting ideas with how to expand our rules engine. And then finally, the availability, as many of you probably know, AWS services are across a wide range of global regions. Mail Manager launched in 6, but we will be expanding the footprint for Mail Manager, starting in the fairly near future, just to give customers in those different locations an ability to maintain, for example, data sovereignty in their country, or they may have applications that are hosted in different regions and they want to again maintain direct connectivity without doing a cross-region transfer. So those are just some of the highlights of our plans, without obviously spilling too many secrets. And I'll ask Zip to move along to the next slide.
Great. Well, great.
You're
Lots
right.
of really great information so far. And I know that we have a lot of questions that have come in from the audience via text. We had some questions that came in prior to the event taking off. And so I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to answer those questions. If we don't get to your particular question and it is burning and you want an answer, please don't hesitate to use the email address we'll give you in just a second. So go ahead and move to that slide so you can see that address as well. But we've got a fair amount of time on our hands and we can start taking and answering some questions. So Jesse, are you there? Do you think you can come on audio and tee up our first question, please?
Yes, I am here. All right, the first question from the audience was, can SES be centrally managed? I answered the question in the context of SES does allow for identities to be synced across regions, as well as delegated via authorization policies to other accounts. Toby, I think the follow-up question would be best for you to answer. If there's a messaging team owning the SES service, can you enforce the SCR forwarding and enable the dev teams to utilize the service at the same time?
Yeah, and the answer is yes, you can do it that way. When you set up Mail Manager as an administrator, one of the things you create is the ingress endpoint, which is ingress to Mail Manager, and that supports both open and authenticated SMTP insertion. Once you have the credentials for an authenticated ingress endpoint, or simply the network location for an open one, you can share that with whomever you like, and they can make use of it per the configuration that the administrator has defined. So for example, if you create an IP restriction, so it'll only accept from your corporate owned block IP blocks, or some other limitation, and then you hand it to your developers to use, they can use it as a vended service that's available to them without any other AWS console work required. And that's a globally available resource. They can connect to it from anywhere.
All right, thank you, Toby. All right, I think this question, maybe Matt, you can start first. Can encryption handle multiple certificates and is PGP available as an encryption option? I think we wanted a little bit more clarity on that, but do you want to take a stab on an initial answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're encrypting with PGP before submitting to Mail Manager, I mean that should just flow through the system in general. If you're wanting to use the encryption that's available from Proofpoint, I'm afraid I'm not super familiar with the options that are available in Pod. Ash, do you know what?
We'd have to get back to the question asker. I don't know either.
Okay, so the person who asked the question, Anthony, if you would like to email a follow-up question into the Mail Manager address, that'd be great. Otherwise, if you post in the chat, that's fine too.
Yeah, Anthony, if you can send an email to the address that's on the screen, we'll get back to you on it. Speaking of, just sorry to interrupt you, Jesse, but speaking of that email address, also feel free to email that if you are having any issues with the integration. The folks on this call, we're happy to get on live with you and do some live troubleshooting. So don't be shy about reaching out to us through that alias.
That would include if you want help before you start to tackle the integration as well. As you saw, it's not particularly difficult, but we'd be very happy to talk with you beforehand, and just use the email address that's there. A bunch of people are on that email address.
Okay, and the next question was, can people get these slides and link to the integration doc? I assume if the best way to do it would just be to email that address, or follow up with a blog where we'll put relevant information, including the recording. Okay,
We do plan to post the recording. It will take us a few days, maybe a few days longer due to the holiday coming up. But we will post this recording. I think we posted to a YouTube channel.
That's right.
Okay, next question. Does option 2, I believe that was related to the architecture diagram, the second option, does it require 2 instances of Mail Manager? Matt, do you want to tackle that one first, and then maybe Toby, you can follow up?
Yeah, it does. It does require 2 mail manager configurations: one to route mail down to SER, then a second to receive the mail coming back up from SER.
Yeah. So we have a few different customer deployments where these sorts of dependent external acts are performed on mail as part of the flow. There are, depending on exactly what you're doing to the message, impacts the details of the answer. But some customers are doing it with 2 instances because they have different acceptance criteria for ingestion into each instance. So, for example, in this model that Matt's describing, the second instance only accepts mail from the SER pod, and there's an IP restriction accordingly that enforces that. But there are other scenarios where we can the output loop from whatever the external tool is can deliver mail back to the first instance, and we can, for example, look for header values, custom headers as a rules engine action, or other criteria, and take a differentiated path depending on the nature of the message. But that presupposes that, for example, the tool is not touching SPF or DKIM or DMARC, and that remains entirely within the purview of Mail Manager. So the answer is it can go either way, and it does depend. But for now, the simplest answer is usually to use 2 instances.
Okay, and I have a quick clarifying question, Toby. You can have multiple ingress points within a single Mail Manager instance where you could set this up, correct?
You can, but each ingress endpoint is associated with a single rule set. So, under your AWS account, you can have multiple such configurations. That's right.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, I answered the next question in chat, but I can clarify. So right now, the team who has app devs that are sending email directly from SES are decentralized, but they're authorized to send mail via DKIM. How is there a way to find all these apps easily? The easiest way to do it is to look at the DMARC reports that will contain the DKIM selectors, and that'll map to the DNS entries you have in your DNS. I guess that's about all I have to say for that. Unless anyone else has any clarifying questions on that, or follow up on that. Okay, if there's any follow-ups to that question, please email the address and we'll try to get a better answer. For these rules, can you have multiple SMTP relays? So you can say email from app1 at company.com. We use SMTP auth for app1 at company.com on the SER pod, but then have a different rule to map to a different SMTP auth credential. This would allow reporting in the SER pod to continue based on what credential is being used. Matt, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, so like Toby was mentioning, you can have multiple SMTP and Mail Manager ingress points, and you can set multiples of those up and have each one attached to a different SER credential, and so you can bifurcate all of your traffic just by replicating the same process.
And then I wonder if the use case here is being able to tease out from an SER reporting standpoint what the individual application is that resides within AWS. And indeed, if you had a unique rule that was connecting to SER with a unique SMTP auth cred, everything would flow down, would identify that downstream on the SER side. So yeah, that would be a clever way to be able to report on individual applications, have each of them connect to SER from a unique rule with a unique SMTP auth cred. Does that sound right, Matt?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm glad it's not complicated.
What's that?
Glad it's not complicated.
Yeah.
That would be a really interesting way to do it. I don't know that you'd want to do it for 100 applications, though.
Right. Yeah. If you did just one rule with one credential out to SER, to us, it looks like it's all coming from one place. Your point is well made. How far you want to go down the path of a unique cred per app would be up to you. You could sort of cluster them in a sensible way.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think folks get the idea.
All right. Next question. Does the Proofpoint SER solution require any infrastructure to manage?
No, and I tried to answer this, but was unable to over the chat. SER is a solution that's hosted by Proofpoint, so in that sense, it is SaaS. There is an optional on-prem component that you can deploy, super lightweight MTA that's just sort of an aggregator of traffic, but that's optional. So otherwise, Proofpoint is as I said, is hosted. SER is hosted by Proofpoint.
Okay, I think that wraps up all the questions. I'm reading through them. I don't see anything that has been unanswered. Does anyone have any last minute questions they'd like to ask? Oh, I see. One just came in. Or two came in. All right, from Emilio, if we set up a standard dedicated IP in SES, can a working SMTP relay be created in SES without specifying any authentication credential to Proofpoint SER, and just have SER allow the mail based on SES dedicated IP?
Matt, wouldn't you just do the unauthenticated approach and then lock in on that that dedicated?
Yeah, I mean that is possible. I'm curious why that's needed though, because if you're able to send mail into Mail Manager, Mail Manager can authenticate with SCR without any problem, and the application doesn't have to authenticate. So I'm not sure I understand the use case there. It's technically possible.
If I may, I think there's a bit of overlap. I think the question may be based on the presumption of using the SES Send Mail API. So I did make reference in our plans for next year with more integration options into other SES applications with Mail Manager. And so if I'm understanding the question correctly, we're using the SES API to send mail, and there is currently through SES Outbound not an option to specify a separate external relay. The only place where that option exists is in Mail Manager. What we are intending to do is allow the API sending to make use of Mail Manager features like the mail relay. So your bulk sending application could then be configured to deliver mail to a relay and hand it off to SER for Proofpoint to perform their additional work.
That makes sense.
But to be clear, that's not available today.
Correct. That's not yet in the product. It is a prioritized feature to be added in the near future.
And then one additional clarity on that, it is possible to create an unauthenticated SMTP relay. That requires the recipient domain to be verified to prevent abuse. So you're not forwarding spam to places that shouldn't receive spam. And also check out our blog on echo spoofing. We also add additional headers to help you ensure that there aren't spoofed mail coming into your tenant that would exploit your allow list rules. So we can provide a link to that in the follow-up as well. Next question. I see this as a solution to replace MTAs. Is that correct?
Yeah, from the mail manager perspective, that's absolutely correct. You know, there are lots of AWS customers who have stood up their own MTAs inside EC2, and you know, with varying degrees of visibility about what those MTAs are actually doing. So, Mail Manager is a fantastic way to take all of that overhead out of EC2 and host it in a single location for shared visibility and controls. And that is absolutely one of the major features we're seeing customers use already. They can retire all of that legacy mail infra that they've built, you know, on a project by project basis over many years in some cases, clean that all up and standardize it so that all mail into and out of their AWS infrastructure traverses Mail Manager as the choke point.
That's most likely going to also increase the resiliency of your solution and most likely decrease the cost. So there's a lot of benefits to using Mail Manager to replace MTAs.
Okay. Can SER integrate with Threat Insight? I'm guessing Threat Insight is a Proofpoint feature.
Yes, it can.
Okay. And how about pricing? Do we have any answers on that?
For SER?
Yeah, the question is just pricing in general. I think maybe both of you answer, please.
I can simply answer on the SER side, customers pay based on what we consider throughput, which is data that traverses the system.
Yeah, and Mail Manager is similar. It's a usage-based pricing model for the volume of mail that you send through the ruled engine. And the pricing tools are available on the AWS pricing calculator.
All right.
There's another one about deliverability I see has popped up as well.
Yeah, our deliverability metrics collected via Mail Manager, SER, or both. Does it include inbox placement? Do you want me to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, go for it, Jesse.
Okay. Yeah, as deliverability manager for SES, I think I can answer this. So it really depends on the point of egress for whether Proofpoint or AWS is handling the message off to the final recipient's mail server. That point of ingress, that whatever service is in that point of egress to that mail server will have the best view on deliverability metrics. As far as Mail Manager goes, if you are using the Mail Manager send to internet action, that is sending out through the normal SES outbound mail channels. So that'll be compatible with pretty much all the SES outbound features. But maybe Toby, if there are any roadmap items in that regard, please clarify.
No, the intention is, like you said, Jesse, if you send to internet from Mail Manager, you know, we want to preserve deliverability data. But if in this model you're using a relay action to deliver to an additional MTA, essentially, in this case, the Proofpoint SER pod, then we have no line of sight on final deliverability to the recipient mail system. So you wouldn't have the metrics in that case.
Toby, you guys offer click tracking. Do you not as part of SES?
We do through the sending API. That's right.
Through the sending API, yeah. So if customers were using that, it is our expectation if that email flowed through us and we sent it out, that click tracking would be preserved. We wouldn't be tampering with any of that. So from a click tracking standpoint, if it flowed through a relay, at least in our case, we would expect that to be unaffected.
All right, I think that wraps all the questions. Would anyone like to give a final parting word of wisdom? Otherwise, I'm just going to hand it off to Zip to close it out.
I'll just say thrilled that everybody joined. We're thrilled with this partnership and this integration, and it's one that we're going to continue to iterate on with the SES folks. So to us, this is just the beginning. And then also, I said it before, but don't be shy about sending an email to that alias there. We want to engage with you to help you get things set up, as Zip said, either before you start or, as I said, after you've started. So, we're committed to making this successful and useful to you.
Right. And I'll just add to that, Ash. Thank you. Thanks to the Proofpoint team for obviously engaging with some of their customers and talking to us early on in this. But most importantly, thanks to the customers. We've had some great conversations already with a number of customers who are either have already explored this and have signed off on it for their production use, or are still in the process of it. But without exception, the results have all been successful. So we're delighted to see that. It really, we think, emphasizes the importance of Mail Manager as a way to handle your mail when it leaves AWS. And recognizing that it often has other places it needs to go before it's released to its recipients. So I mentioned at the very beginning, and I'll just reinforce it here, we'd love to have shared conversations with you. I know a number of folks have already written into the alias during the course of the webinar. You do need to provide us with explicit permission to have that joint conversation. So please, if you're comfortable with that, say so in the mails that you send. If you sent one already and didn't say that, we will assume that you don't provide that permission unless you write again and provide it. So we appreciate everybody allowing us to keep the attorneys happy with following policy, and we look forward to picking up on all of those threads and having direct conversations with you in the near future.
Yep, thanks. Security and privacy are very, very important. Day one, job one here at Amazon Web Services. On behalf of the SES team that has put together webinars, I think every month in 2024, we thank our customers for attending. We thank all of the people who put the productions together. We especially thank our partners like Proofpoint. This has been a great webinar. We wish you really, really happy holidays. And we'll see you in 2025 with even more exciting webinars and blog posts. Oh, we're not done with the blogs. So don't hesitate to go to the AWS messaging and targeting blog. If you don't know the address there, just type it into your favorite search engine, and we continue to post up blogs through the rest of the year. And that's a great place to learn about the latest and greatest happenings with AWS SES and our other services as well. So on behalf of myself, the entire team here at AWS, and I'll say on behalf of Proofpoint as well, happy holidays, and thank you very much for attending today's webinar.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Thanks.
care.